Hello and welcome to our live sleep chat for professionals. My name is Mar DiCarlo. I am the founder of the International Parenting and Health Institute, as well as the educational director. And I'm here with Soda Kushkowski, who is the founder of Start with Sleep, and she is also the head instructor of our Integrative Adult Sleep Coach program. And today we're going to discuss with all of you how to have meaningful conversations in your professional practice. It's a topic that we find a lot of professionals struggle with simply because sleep is not often a hot topic, and there are many other concerns that usually will come to the table depending on what your main focus is in your practice. So Soda and I today are going to talk about how you can begin integrating and having those conversations in a way that really motivates and inspires your clientele. So welcome, Soda. So great to always have you on our live sleep chats.
Thank you. I just had a call with a group of our students this morning, and we were having the same conversation because there's so much to learn about sleep, right? So when we talk about the sleep space, it's easy to go down this rabbit hole, right? But it's always about refocusing our efforts to who it is that we're trying to represent so that those conversations are very targeted and very meaningful. When you said, it's overlooked, often sleep is overlooked, it's a catalyst as a learning and development tool for professional development, for time efficiency. We often don't think about it, right? But not only does it help us with health, it helps us support every other personal and professional goal in our life. So it's definitely something that needs to be on the table.
Absolutely, 100%. And I think what happens a lot of times too is people don't realize how easy it actually is to have that conversation, because when I gave this topic a lot of thought and I went back and I thought about, okay, all the clients I've had conversations with, as well as professionals, and how we get into these conversations, it's pretty simple when you think about, okay, for example, the quality of life. And you can tie in the quality of life to how someone is feeling. And when you go into how someone is feeling, you can go into, well, I don't have much energy. I'm feeling fatigue. I don't have motivation. I don't have inspiration. And so these are all windows of opportunities that you can begin having those conversations. And I know that you always love doing this like I do, which is the evaluation and assessment part in questioning. And so I think another part of the struggle that a lot of professionals have is because, and especially the new ones coming on board who are super excited to start sharing with their clientele what they've learned, what they know, and providing advice, is that it's very easy to get caught up in your conversation to share with your client how much you know, or to start going into how many tips or advice you can give, versus taking a step back and asking those powerful questions, because it's in those powerful questions, in the questioning, that you can begin opening these deeper conversations. And then through that and through active listening, you can begin extracting and getting to the root causes of a lot of the issues your clients are experiencing, which a good chunk of them are tied to sleep and sleep quality, right, Soda?
Yeah, exactly what you're saying. These meaningful conversations are about also meeting individuals where they're at. A big part of what we provide in the program is that kind of that discovery where is an individual at? Are they testing their readiness for change, their level of commitment? Are they someone who tends to want to jump from thing to thing, or can they commit themselves to something for a short or a longer period of time? So I think it's really important to really focus on, when we're looking at challenges, like, who is this individual that I'm working with? Those meaningful conversations start with, who is the individual before me, versus like, how many questions can I ask them? Or, dumping all, like you said, dumping all this information on them. There's so much that we've learned in clinical research, statistics, and so forth, but how is it relevant to that individual? That's the only information you should be sharing.
Exactly. Meeting them where they're at. That is something that comes up also quite often, where when I review a lot of case studies with professionals, we do this quite often, and we go into assessing where they may have some challenges in their evaluation or what they've missed in their case studies. And often what comes up is this part of meeting their clients where they're at. Because, for example, they will get to know their client. They will ask a number of questions to learn what's the client history is, whether it's the health history, mental history, and so on, what led them to the challenge. And they'll ask a series of questions where they will find out all this information about their client. But then when it comes to providing an action step plan and getting into that first stage of, okay, now let's collaborate and let's work together to find out, what practical and effective solutions and action steps you can begin taking this week that are going to lead to the goals that you want to achieve. A lot of professionals, where they miss the mark, that I find, is that they jump right to the goal and the action steps that are attaining the goal immediately, versus saying, okay, if my client was, let's say, sleep deprived for the last month and they had been going to bed at 1 a.m. and waking up at 6 a.m., for example, then a lot of times the professional will just immediately provide them an action step that is pretty extreme and have them, going to bed, let's say at 7 or 8 the next night, and trying to wake up during a certain time, versus going, okay, what's going to work for someone who's been in this habit for this amount of time? Doesn't make sense to go to such an extreme and cold turkey to just jumpstart them immediately into this place. And so exactly what you're saying, meeting your client where they're at is extremely important. And then diving into those meaningful questions that are much more than just the health history and the mental history and what led them there. But, why does this mean to them? Why is their goal something that they want to achieve? Why are they motivated to achieve that goal? And a lot of that has to do with what you said about those readiness for change questions. Why are they led so strongly to make these changes? What is it about achieving this change that is going to make a world of a difference in their life? And once we start getting into that, the client will begin to realize, yeah, that will be so meaningful for me. To have more rest, to have more energy, will be more meaningful to me. And one more thing that I will say, and I know you have a lot to say to this too, Soda, which is everything requires energy. If you want to make a change to, let's say, your body, you want to have weight loss, you want to achieve more strength, that requires energy and mental focus. You want to fine tune your nutrition, that takes energy and mental focus. You want to make changes financially, that takes energy and mental focus. So when you are looking at so many aspects of health and lifestyle, it requires energy and focus, and a lot more, but I'm just honing in on those qualities, because these are the fundamental foundations to rest and sleep. And so if that's lacking already, you can imagine the limitations that are already imposed on a person to start with if the sleep quality and the rest is not addressed to begin with.
Yeah, I think that, a lot of what you're saying has to do with the work that we do as sleep coaches, which is being reflective in nature, right? Having people really, like, that active listening also comes into, the more people talk, the more they hear themselves, and they realize the things that they do to get in their own way, right? Another big part of what we talk about is like our core belief system. A lot of times we don't realize like why we make the choices we do. Like now there's a lot of talk about like intentional or intuitive eating, right? Like, why is it that we make the choices that we do? Is it more emotional based? Like, is it, lifestyle or behavior habits that we picked up from like our childhood, like especially when it comes to like our relationship with sleep? Our first introduction to that was our family model, right? Like, did you have a strict bedtime? Was it kind of like loosely based and everybody just kind of went to sleep when they did because there wasn't really any kind of importance placed on it or any kind of routine in place? And it also comes to setting realistic goals. This was another thing I talked with the students this morning, because a lot of times we set unrealistic goals for ourselves. That's where like a coach, it can be a very supportive individual and a mentor in that space, because a lot of times we say, well, I can do this, or if I do a little bit each day. Like I was just talking to a student and they were talking about, oh, well, I want to carve out a little bit of time, an hour each day. But then we're putting all this pressure on ourselves. And we have enough in this world that's going on, especially, not to say about women, but we tend to be more multitaskers, right? We're always taking on lots. And then we feel guilt when we don't complete something or something gets pushed to the next day. So being really like being kind to ourselves, setting realistic goals, setting time aside so that we also can be present and mindful, right? If there's work to be done, you can't just say, oh, well, I'm going to do an overhaul on everything. As a coach, when we put together those actionable steps, it's okay, what realistically can we do within the next 3 to 7 days, in the next week, in the next 2 weeks, as we're moving into, it might take 3, 6, 9 months, because a lot of the habits that we form are lifelong things, right? So it's going to take a period of time to undo a lot of these things or to replace them with healthier habits, right? It's not going to be an overnight fix.
100%. And I think part of that, an important part of that process, is for professionals to also understand that it is a co-collaboration. It's a collaboration. You're co-creating this experience with your clients. And so taking the pressure off of yourself as a holistic coach and professional, and understanding that, yes, you have a lot of knowledge, you have so much to give and provide and to offer your client. But at the same time, there is an incredible amount of information that is important to receive, like you were mentioning, active listening on the receiving end, and to understand that a huge part of the success, all right, of the outcome will also be based on your client's ability, like you said, so to reflect, to, oh, that light bulb go off. Wow. Yeah, look at those habits I've had for a while. I didn't realize how long I've had that habit or where that came from. And your client also in that experience sharing what works for them or what doesn't. It's so funny when I work with professionals also, a lot of times because they have so much pressure on themselves, they get so caught up on having to be perfect with their, action steps and have these perfect solutions. And I say to them, you will have a lot of these answers from this exchange from your client, but please don't put all the pressure on yourself. Engaging with your client, making your client part of the process to the solution, getting that feedback from your client, where your client will say, well, I think this will be most effective. Or now that I'm reflecting on what has worked or hasn't worked in the past, I can see that if we try this, that might be a little bit of a stretch. Right. So in the process of formulating your action steps for your client, it's important that you review with them what you've planned. And in that review process, you will also gain their feedback and have a deeper understanding and more clarity of, all right, am I on the mark? Have I gone too far? Did I go to extremes? Like you were saying, a lot of professionals.
What are those limiting beliefs that often, a lot of times it has to do with either misinformation, or they think they're doing something that's healthy, and they don't actually realize what they're doing is working against them.
Exactly. And when you have, like you were saying, the belief, which in our program, by the way, everybody who's listening, we dive so deep into that, into the beliefs of not only the client, but also the professional, because what we're believing already as we go into the session, as we go into this journey and continue on, is already setting the stage of our outcome. If you, I forget what the exact, I'm probably going to, butcher this, but it's something like, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right.
Okay? No, that's exactly it.
Right? Exactly. Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And so how we're thinking as we go into this process and throughout the process is tremendously vital to the outcome. And so that is part of the reasoning that Soda and I are passionate about going and diving deep into the process of this all. And so to have these meaningful conversations, it really does require a level of compassion, a level of confidence, patience, where when you are in an exchange with an individual, you understand that as much as you bring to the table, they're going to, again, be a huge asset to all the information that you need for that outcome.
No, absolutely. I think, when it comes to working with clients, with sharing information, I think this is where having this supplemental kind of like education in regards to this missing link of sleep, right? It's a conversation that we're not having, but it's very pertinent to the larger picture, this holistic.
Connected to what I was saying before, which is when you have the confidence, when you have the patience, when you have this deeper understanding, compassion going in that, okay, I am here to provide a tremendous offer to this person who's coming to me, who is going to be sharing with me their challenge. And I want to be of a tremendous support system to them. I want to provide them solutions. But I also have to, at some point, understand that in this process, it is a collaboration and there is a letting go of me needing to put all the pressure on myself as a professional to have all the answers. And when you start there, right, and like we were talking about the beliefs, maybe you're going to add to that the whole beliefs going into it. This provides your client an opportunity to have this mutual exchange, this partnership where you're now this strong team. And any limitations that your client may have been placing on themselves, whether it's from beliefs, whether it's emotional baggage that they're carrying into the situation, when you as a professional show up in such a way where, again, you're bringing these qualities of confidence and compassion, active listening, you're giving them a chance to reflect, you're letting go of having to know it all and hold the world on your shoulders for your client, and you understand it's that collaborative process, your client has a stronger opportunity to rise up to the occasion, to meet you where you're at, as a professional, and therefore your exchange will be that much more powerful. And that's one of the reasons, if you haven't seen it already, just for those of you that want to take things a little bit further, just on the skills of a holistic coach, I just launched on October 18th what's called Holistic Coach Education Advanced Training for Holistic Professionals, where I'm just providing these short tips of different kinds of topics and questions that come up quite often in the work that I do and that Soda does as well. And it often comes up where, whether it's competition, whether it's feeling guilty about a client leaving you, there's a number of topics that come up. But one of the topics that I discuss is how you prepare for your session and how you transition into and begin your session. And what is very helpful, if anyone can take this tip, I don't know if you're doing this already, but it's very helpful. Where you just came from plays a big role into how you're then starting the next thing you're into. So let's say you were just back-to-back clients. Let's say your client just came from work or from being with their children, or who knows, everyone just came from somewhere. And so regardless of where you came from, it's important to take a little bit of space to set up the intention and to clear yourself and your client of anything prior that may interfere in the current session and in the exchange. So what I like to do is what I call a settling in or arriving exercise. And what all this does is it gives you and your client an opportunity to clear the space, to settle in. You can do a breathing exercise to calm and recalibrate the nervous system. But what this settling and arriving exercise does is just refocuses everything into the present moment so that your client is present with you, you're present with your client, you're in your body, your client's in their body, your focus is there, your client's focus is there. And then from there, you can have a stronger, and again, more meaningful, powerful exchange. So these are the kinds of tools that Soda and I go into in the classes we teach when we mentor professionals, because it's these kinds of things that then will provide you the confidence that you need and the clarity that you need to know, okay, when I go into this session, I am going to give my client the space to share, so I can meet them where they are at, to reflect, and then go into a meaningful conversation that will then lead to those deeper questions that will then give you an ability to go into these topics of sleep a lot more effective.
Absolutely. And I think that's, part of it in terms of incorporating sleep into whatever practice that you're in. I mean, there's so many different kind of avenues and channels in terms of like working within the sleep space. I mean, you have mental health initiatives, right? You can't have those without sleep interventions. That's a huge conversation that has to happen, amongst social workers, mental health counselors, and so forth. There are additional certifications and things that you can take, but in terms of like really understanding holistically, and I think that was the point that I was I always have a lot of ideas bouncing. Every time you talk, I have 20 things I want to say, but I can't say them all. Really looking at it in a holistic way, like, it goes beyond like caffeine and light regulation. And really, when you say like understanding the individual, if you're working with them, like in a therapy space, like emotionally, like we all do things for a reason, right? And our sleep is affected. I was talking about the fact that we all go through transitions, right? So if you think about babies, they learn how to crawl and walk and talk, and all these things can cause disruptions in sleep the same way as adults, right? We might, and especially as we get older, if we're changing jobs, the loss of a loved one, that there's all these different things that can affect our sleep, but there isn't necessarily training tools to coincide with that to say, okay, when this happens, what do we do besides writing that prescription for a sleeping aid, right? Which are meant to be used very short term, which can be very beneficial within that space. But then it's really about how do you empower that individual to say, okay, if I get inside of my own head, or physically and mentally I'm not connecting, how can I breathe? How can I move in a way that's going to still get me to a place where I'm ready to settle in and really embrace sleep for the night? So I think what you're talking about, introducing this physicality into the work that we do, is amazing. I keep saying, I'm like, Mara's going to introduce it into everything, because I think that is so important to really be present in that space. Because like I said, when we're trying to constantly learn, now there's, I don't know what the new term is, but we're just inundating ourselves with information all the time. It's great to be an avid learner. But I had, someone just the other day who was like, they're constantly reading about sleep, but it's actually feeding their paranoia and causing them to have larger sleep issues. They asked me about sleep books, and I said, there's a lot of them out there. But when it comes to like the work that I do, I try to be very mindful, right? Because there are a lot of benefits that we get from getting good sleep. Alternatively, when we don't get enough sleep, or the quality is compromised, or we get into sleep deprivation, there are a number of bidirectional things that can happen. But you reading all the negative consequences isn't going to help your sleep challenge. If you learn that it increases suicidal thoughts, likelihood for depression, can make you pre-diabetic, compromise your cardiovascular health, reduce your lifespan, like all of those things are very terrifying. They are very true, and it's valid. But that's not the things we want to concentrate on. We want to concentrate on how can we create these healthier habits that are going to help support the best sleep that we can get, versus like really sitting in a negative space and just kind of thinking about that doom and gloom of like, oh my goodness, if I get short another hour tonight, like there's all these things that can happen. We really need to just embrace the sleep that we do get, and know that it's a natural biological process, right? Like we can't force it upon ourselves, and reading and knowing everything there is to know about it isn't going to improve your sleep.
100%. You really hit the nail on the head when you started, well, with this whole conversation, but especially in this particular piece right here, where what you focus on, you strengthen. Whether you are an individual client listening to this, whether you're a professional listening to this is a fact. Whatever you focus on, you strengthen. You're going to focus on negativity, that will increase. You're going to focus on the solution, that's going to increase. See a problem for what it is, but don't get stuck there. See, like what Soda was saying, the negatives of what happens when you don't sleep and have sleep deprivation, but then move and put all your focus on energy on the solution.
Tony Robbins says, identify your problems, but give your energy and power to your solutions.
That's exactly it. Identify, but don't empower. That's exactly it. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Soda, for reminding us this. 100%. Look, you're a personal trainer, for example. Your client wants to get stronger. Your client comes in excited, or they want to lose weight. Maybe they want to do a combination of both. You see how motivated they are. You see how much they're trying their best to go through every single week the action steps you have for them in regards to their exercise, maybe even their nutrition, right, to attain these goals. But yet they're lagging. Yet you see that things are not, there's limitations happening. Maybe their thoughts and beliefs start kicking in. Maybe, because it's all related. Mm-hmm. Sleep deprivation can lead to negative thoughts. So, it's like, which came first, the chicken or egg, right? You can have negative thoughts that then stop you from sleep, or you can have, sleep deprivation that leads to negative thoughts. So if you're a professional, let's say like a personal trainer, and you begin to notice these things, sitting down with your client, reviewing your action steps, talking about what might be getting in the way, talking about how they're feeling energetically, talking about how they're feeling with the quality of life, and really getting into the conversation of energy, fatigue. How much energy do you feel that you have? Do you feel you can have more, or are you not having enough? Just starting in those places. If you are a mental health professional in whatever regard, psychologist, psychiatrist, and you begin to, notice that no matter what you're trying, let's say you've gone into all these different kind of methods that you're taught, because there's so many amazing ones out there that I certainly value and hold a lot of value to. but your client is still struggling, then it's worth, and I would say even from the beginning, that's what Soda and I are pushing here. But, again, just notice how when your client begins, you try all these things, but your client still seems stuck. Again, going into the conversation about the sleep quality, what is happening on the day-to-day life. And I'll even mention, because I know, Soda, you and I had a very similar conversation with what I'm about to say, which is when we're talking about sleep, it's not just sleep, it's rest. Okay. So it's living a lifestyle where, right now, society, for the majority part, okay, I understand there might be exceptions, very rare exceptions, but for the majority of society, we are on overdrive. We are overly stimulated, just like Soda was saying. It's like, okay, learn more. What more can we add? What more can we do? And on top of that, we have all these distractions, the social media, these conversations, the drama, everything happening in everybody's life. And so for people to have the ability and the comfortability to just be, I was actually having this conversation yesterday with a friend of, so interesting how it's a human being and it's about being, but how comfortable are we just being? We're like doing. It should be human doing. No, it's human being. And so a lot of what's happening with many of us is that we've gotten into such a habit and pattern of doing more and more and more and more. And this overstimulation, consumption, that being has become we're so far removed from that. And then it also feels uncomfortable when we start to invite that. So as professionals, you have a tremendous opportunity to begin changing this overdrive, this overstimulation that's happening on our planet, which we need desperately, because we cannot have meaningful conversations if we're fighting. We're usually fighting because we're full of tension. We're usually full of tension, not only because of a thought or belief, because of either sleep deprivation or we're constantly just tense, right? We're living our life constantly tense. We're not learning how to relax, how to have fun. And so as a professional, you have a tremendous opportunity to impact the entire world, one client at a time, by beginning to have these conversations about, what is their quality of life like right now? How are they able to meet every moment in a way where they're not constantly in this fight or flight or tension? And anything you can provide in your practice to support your clients' way of being, their lifestyle, in such a way where they begin introducing, daily pauses. They begin introducing, again, small baby steps of ways that they can relax a bit more, have fun a bit more, discuss the sleep quality and so on. This is going to make a tremendous world of a difference, not just for them and you, but one client at a time can change the entire world. Okay. That's my spiel.
I have 2 points to make. I've limited myself to 2 instead of lots. Okay. So number 1, that reminds me of a quote that I like to use. It says, sleep is the investment you need for the energy to be effective tomorrow. So that's number 1. And I think that's very relevant. Number 2 is to kind of just pedal back to what you were talking about in terms of like the physical space, because a lot of times when we're hitting these kind of like plateaus where you're no longer like losing weight, like our sleep is directly correlated to the hormones that regulate hunger and appetite, right? So it is very relevant to maintaining and losing, managing our weight overall. In the mental health space, there's that vicious cycle between stress and mental health, right? It's like, if we're not sleeping enough, then we tend to be more stressed. If we're stressed, then we're not, you know what I mean? It just goes round and round. But again, those conversations aren't being had. So sleep is really that missing link, that connecting piece that can really help with, it's like you hit the, wall. I'll often work with clients. It's like, I've been on every sleep aid known. I've tried, CBTI, and there's something to be said, like, there's a couple of programs now that have been FDA cleared and they're being used in the traditional model. And they say that, there's a success rate of like 70 to 80% for individuals in terms of symptoms when it comes to insomnia, right? But a lot of times the conversations aren't around the fact that a very small percentage of people actually complete those programs. So it's a large success rate, but only a small completed. And if you look very closely now, a lot of these programs, whether they're applications or programs in themselves, they're looking and utilizing sleep coaches because they realize that that's a missing piece. Like, you can't have someone filling out information or even using a sleep application and measuring sleep staging without someone there to explain what that is. And you can only automate and generalize so much of that information because people also want that interaction. If the last 2 years have taught us anything, is that people want that connection.
100%. And I'm so glad that you mentioned the success rate of that, because what I'm also finding is that a lot of these last short term. I will give you a short story. I had a transformational experience in 2005. I was at a crossroads with where I was at in my life. I was making some major changes, big decisions. I was very overwhelmed, very overstimulated. And I had a little bit of vacation time. And so what I did, it's a very long story. I'm giving you just the bits and pieces that are relevant to this conversation. I went on this 10-day Vipassana meditation where you go away for 10 days to separate the women and men into two different camps. You don't speak, you don't write, you literally do nothing. You're just being, and you go through these meditations on a daily basis. The first few days, it was a little uncomfortable, but I started feeling a bit more relief just because I had so much overwhelm and just so much on me. And now here I was with nothing to do, no responsibilities for the moment in time. Mm-hmm. By the 10th day, because I didn't know how it was going to turn out, it was like this huge burden or weight had been lifted off. It's almost like I dropped, it almost like my mind or my energy had been 100 pounds overweight, and all of a sudden it just fell off by the end of the week. And when I returned back to work, everybody was like, oh my gosh, wow, what happened to you? They felt the changes, right? In my presence and so on. So the reason I'm sharing that is because what ended up happening is, at the time I was living in New York City, and I went back to New York City and I kept up with it. I kept up every day. I'm like, okay, I'm getting up first thing in the morning. I'm going to do my hour meditation. I'm going to do it at night. And little by little by little, while this no doubt changed my life, and I have this always as a resource, I began to understand that on the long term, unless I began to add this practice in a very practical, effective way to my daily living, if I kept going to this extreme, it just wasn't going to stick. And this is what happens to people most often. This is what Soda's talking about. And so it's not about, okay, yes, sometimes we do need, like I needed to go away for 10 days. I needed to have that in my life at that moment in time. But then I also have to realize, okay, if I'm going to, on the long term, if I'm going to keep this on a long-term basis, I have to find practical and effective ways where this becomes part of my lifestyle. This is not something I'm going to keep going back and forth on this pendulum of extremes, okay? And so this is the work that we love to support professionals with, because professionals offer so many methodologies that have so much value. But what happens with a lot of them, and a great amount of limitation with a lot of them, is that they're set up in such a way that they're not really truly 100% practical for everyday living. And because people self-sabotage often, and there's all these other things that come into play, even relationships that people are in. People don't often address relationships. Hey, what are your relationships like? Who are the people around you? And so on. Who do you surround yourself with? A lot of times people don't get into those conversations either, that also influence. I was watching this video on neuroscience, and this one expert was saying that when you're in conversation with someone, and they've done studies and they're looking at the brain activity, it's like the brains merge. Okay. So anyway, the reason I'm sharing that is because when you are with people, when you're on these exchanges, that's how much you're integrating with someone. So your relationships and who you hang around with are important. So the point being is that in order for anything to stick, in order for anything to last long term and to be that effective, where you're not going to concern yourself or worry, oh gosh, is this short lived? Am I going to have to keep going back and forth to extremes? Do I have to create a dependency now on my coach or dependency on this method? It's finding those day-to-day practical and effective ways of integrating something that will support your day-to-day life, that will last for a lifetime. That is the most important part of, all of this, and having conversations where you can give your client also a safe space where they can feel honest with you to share with you, okay, no, that's not going to work. Yes, that will work. Anyway, that's a whole nother conversation. But one thing that Soda and I, one part of this whole process, and one of the reasons we're having these live sleep chats for professionals, is because we do want to open up the conversation. Right now, Soda and I are the ones having the conversation. We'd love to have guests. We'd love to know more about where you're getting stuck in your profession with your clientele. Where or what are the areas that you feel you need more support with. We are here to engage in those conversations, to explore, have an open window of curiosity, share our passion and tips for it as well. So please share with us. You can email us, you can write in the comments. We look forward to receiving any feedback that you have, because as you can tell, we're very passionate about this.
Yeah.
And we just want to continue opening up this conversation on exploration, because we know it's not that we're just experiencing, but we know we're in it. We're in it with professionals, we're in it with our clients. We see the difference that it makes for every person and for the world.
Yes, absolutely. It's all about the empowerment.
100%. So we look forward to our next live sleep chat for professionals. It will be in 1 month. It will be the first Tuesday, as you can see, of every month, same time, same place. We look forward to sharing that with you. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate all of you. We thank you for doing the work that you do, that you're out there, you're supporting people, you're providing such a great service and gift to every person that you support and the world. And so we're very thankful for you and are very grateful for this opportunity to share our passion with all of you. Thank you. Until next time.